Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bear Dash. I am Shaylin.
I'm Jasper.
And we have some great news for Cal fans. Cam Bynum, the star cornerback who originally opted out in favor of the NFL draft, announced his return to the team, which is honestly the best news we've gotten since the news that there was going to be a season. Cam Bynum's return is huge for the secondary. It's huge for the defense as a whole. And frankly, it's huge for Cal's chances at competing in the Pac-12 this year. Jasper, you had the chance to talk to Cam on his press return. Can you talk a little bit about what went into his decision and what led him to come back?
Yeah. So first of all, I think we talked to Cam back when he opted out. And this is something he mentioned, that if there was going to be a fall season, it was something he was going to have to think about. And I got to talk a little bit and watch Coach Wilcox at Media Day today. Got to talk to Cam Bynum, and it sounded like as soon as the season was back on, as soon as that announcement came out, I mean, this was before the schedule came out, as soon as the testing was in place and the fall season was on the cards, Cam Bynum reached out immediately and was like, hey, I'm thinking about playing. The decision wasn't immediate. He said he had a lot to weigh up. There's health concerns. Obviously, there's injury concerns. But it always seemed like he was coming back. At least from the inside. And that wasn't maybe apparent on the outside, but if you look at Shaylin's Twitter feed, you can see that some people really were calling this from a mile out. So
I said it live on air last week. I said I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying it can happen. And then we got the news, I think, a couple of days ago, and I think, yeah, you can keep going, but I think it really is just brought a whole nother source of optimism to this team.
And clearly, at least one of us is good on their predictions. We'll find out about the other half of this show later. But Cam Bynum coming back, it's going to help his draft stock, I think. And this is something I said earlier. He's going to get a chance to get on the field and sort of prove what he has. He has a lot of tape already. In fact, he has more than enough tape. He's got more than enough skills. But it's just about putting in some extra stats. And in a shortened season, if he can have a couple star turns, he can shoot up the boards. He's a third, maybe fourth round pick right now. If he has a really good campaign, he could get into the second round. And more time on television is going to help. Scouts are going to see what he does, and he'll have a chance to train and play football. But I think the number one reason for him, and this is what I got from talking to him, is that he just wants to play. That training for the draft is good, but it's not the same as playing football. And this is a guy that really enjoys playing football and really enjoys just being out there. When we talked to him during his opt-out, he said the thing he's going to miss the most is just getting up to Memorial Stadium, doing trainings, working with his teammates, the early morning workouts, the grind. And I think that's what he's opting back into. He's here to play. He's here to practice. He's here to have fun because he enjoys the sport. You can see it just talking to him. The guy's excited.
Yeah, he's a man who loves football. And one thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is that Justin Wilcox in the spring actually made a comment that surprised a lot of people, saying that Cam Bynum was going to be spending a lot of time at safety and a lot of time at nickel cornerback, neither of which he really did that much in his first 3 years of his career. So I think a lot of his return was to showcase his versatility, because we all know he's not the most athletic player on the field. He said himself that one of the biggest things he needs to improve before the draft and the combine is his 40-yard dash time. He's never going to be the fastest player on the field. He's never going to be the strongest, but he is always one of the smartest players on the field. And I think showcasing to NFL scouts that he can play multiple positions in the secondary is only going to help his stock. And I expect to see him at all those positions. I know it's a shorter season, but he's a guy who's smart enough who can play anywhere. And another thing that him coming back allows the team to do is he can teach some of these younger guys. We've talked about the turnover with Jalen Hawkins and Ashton Davis leaving for the NFL. Now Bynum can help ease that transition going from Gerald Alexander as the DB coach to Marcel Yates, because Cam Bynum's been there for just as long as Coach Wilcox. So he knows this scheme inside and out, and he can help bring the younger guys along. But moving towards what he brings as a player, his leadership is something that you can't replace, and it wasn't going to be replaced. He's the only person left, along with Elijah Hicks, that was there with the original Takers unit that made so many national headlines for being this elite secondary coming out of the Pac-12. But Bynum's going to be there helping calling out adjustments, getting the younger guys in the right places. He's really going to be the quarterback of the secondary. And he's a guy who a lot of coaches and a lot of his teammates talk about being addicted to film. He really just loves watching film all the time. That's what the Takers were known for. And he said even in his presser that he was sending film back and forth with the guys even after he opted out. He was still doing as much as he could, but now being back and being in that same room, it's just going to be take this defense to another level. He's been a starter here for 3 seasons. He knows Wilcox's defense, what Wilcox is looking for out of every position in the secondary. And him coming back is a game changer for the team. He's a straight up baller on the field. It's not just about his leadership. He has 169 career tackles, 32 passes defended, 5 interceptions. He was second team All Pac-12 last season. I expect him to contend for the first team this season. He made a couple preseason first team All Pac-12 lists, a couple more seconds. I think he's teetering right on that edge right now, and a good 7 games could bump him right up. How do you think that his return, though, affects the defense as a whole? Because this was going to be, even though it's just one player, this was going to be a pretty inexperienced for Cal standards defense. And now it feels like with him back, that the defense kind of goes from inexperienced back to experienced, even though it's only one player. How do you see him affecting the defense as a whole?
Yeah, well, you said it. I think the biggest thing is going to be leadership. At Media Day today, Coach Wilcox said, as good of a player as Cam is, he's an even better person. And I think that speaks volumes right there. He is someone everyone on this team loves. He's a standout player in this program. The guy's got charisma. He makes you want to watch the game, and I think he makes you want to play the game too if you're on his team. And that matters. Like you said, this was going to be, without Bynum, a more inexperienced unit. You had Chiggy Anusium, who I think is going to be a fantastic corner, but him as the number 1 and a less experienced number 2, who we really didn't know. That was complicated. I mean, that really gave a lot of quarterbacks an out. And with Chiggy on one side and Cam on the other, there's no easy target here. This isn't a walk for anyone.
You know more than anyone. Anyone who's watched Bear Dash before knows that I was extremely high on Chigozie Anusium. Chiggy, I thought he had the potential to be a number 1 corner on multiple Pac-12 teams. Now, like you said, he's the number 2 corner on this team. So, and Cal's not really known as being a team where they would send Cam Bynum to shadow the best receiver necessarily. But now that doesn't even matter, because if you have Chiggy on one side and Cam Bynum on the other, that's not going to be easy for any receiving core. And this is a secondary that only gave up 1.2 passing touchdowns per game last season, which was 3rd in the Pac-12, and I think they could stay right around that mark. Now with Chiggy and Bynum on the outside. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
It could even be lower. I mean, you think about all these other Pac-12 North schools with new quarterbacks. Imagine you're a new quarterback and you walk onto the field and you have to decide between targeting Chiggy Anusium and Cam Bynum. That's just scary. UW's going to have a fresh quarterback for that first game, and that's the decision-making process. I don't envy him in any way. I mean, that's not going to be fun. But I think there's a lot of ways to break this down. But for me, Cam Bynum is the best player on this team. And there are a lot of great players on this team. But for me, Cam Bynum is probably the best one. And getting your best player back makes you better. There's not a lot of complicated math there. So I do think it's a huge deal.
2 corners is not enough to have a great defense, but now with Cam Bynum and Chiggy on the outside, you give Elijah Hicks, who has the build and potential to be a great safety. He was originally planned to move from corner, where he's played his entire career, to safety, but then once Cam Bynum opted out, there was talk of maybe Hicks moving back to corner to fill that void. But now Hicks is going to be able to stick with safety. He's great in zone coverage. He's big physical frame. He can deliver hits. He's well suited for that position. And then in the slot, you have Josh Drayden, who's super sticky. He's also made some really clutch open field tackles. So this secondary, you're losing 2 great players to the draft, but this secondary could still be very good. There's only one person in the secondary who's going to be having played a lot of reps. Chiggy and Drayden both played a lot last season, even though they weren't full-time starters, which means you're only going to have one player who really is decently inexperienced, and that's going to be the other safety position, which is likely going to be Daniel Scott, who still has a good amount of playing time, or Craig
Yeah.
Woodson, who coaches are super high on.
Hey, both those guys are great options. I mean, Daniel Scott had an interception in the big game last season. By no means green or new. He's been around this program. He's been there. And Craig Woodson is a guy a lot of people talk about. I think Bynum, again, you're getting your best player back, but he takes this from a maybe a higher ceiling, less experienced unit to a still very high ceiling, but now much more experienced unit. That's the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, and as we continue through this episode, feel free to leave any comments you guys have for us in the live chat. We'd be happy to answer them. But with Bynum back now, I know you've had some bold predictions for this team. Does Bynum coming back change those expectations for you at all? They were already pretty high for you, but
they're already. It's hard to
not necessarily your expectations, but your hopes for this team. Does Bynum coming back change that?
They are pretty high. It's harder to get much higher than what I called last time out. And for the record, because it's already on the record, I did say that it was possible, perhaps not wholly likely, but definitely possible that Cal could be a CFP contender. That Cal could make the CFP. Schedule breaks the right way. Cal ends up undefeated. I won't go into it. You can watch episodes of Dash Sports at dashsports.com or dashsports.tv and get all my ridiculously hot takes there. But I was actually really excited because this is my hot take. Talking to Cam when he opted back in, he said that his expectations for this team are that they won't lose a game, that they can go to a certain bowl game in Pasadena, and that they expect to do well. And I agree. I don't think there's a single game on this schedule that isn't winnable for Cal. I feel like that. I mean, that's a touch harder without your best corner. And now that your best corner is back, we talked. There's so many reasons why he makes the secondary better, and that just shores it up. You're gonna have a bunch of young cornerbacks against one of the best cornerbacks, if not the best cornerback in the Pac-12. And I think it just makes each game that much more difficult for the opposing teams and that much more likely to be a Cal victory. So I think it certainly nudges my predictions for this team from high to higher. And it makes me a little more certain that this is a possibility, just because Bynum is such a great leader on this defense.
Yeah, and for me, while my expectations might not be quite as high as Jasper's, I think I said originally 5-2 for this team, right? Losing one of the non-conference or non-division games and one of the North games. This makes me lean a bit closer to 6-1 than 5-2. I'm going to stick with 5-2 just because there's so many unknown variables this season. We've seen in the NFL how injuries are just running rampant. Like, it seems like every team is just being plagued with whether it be ligament injuries, muscle injuries, whatever the case may be. That's, I'm sure, going to be in the cards for the Pac-12 as well, which is unfortunate. But there's so many unknown variables. It could swing either way. But I do agree that Bynum back is going to be extremely helpful in certain games, especially some of the good quarterbacks Cal's going against. And what comes to mind to me is the ASU game against Jaden Daniels. Having Cam Bynum in that lineup makes me so much more comfortable with the secondary in that game compared to how comfortable I was with that game last week. Like, I think Cal's chances go up the most in that game out of any game. But I think Cal's defense as a whole has an even better chance to be a top 3 unit in the Pac-12. They have a good shot of overtaking Utah or UW to break into that list. And Cam Bynum's going to be the leader along the way. But moving on to the schedule was released for all Pac-12 teams. At least a 6-game regular season schedule before Week 7 is determined by seeding based on each division. What, in your opinion, is Cal's biggest game of 2020, Jasper?
First of all, I think all these games become big games. In a schedule that's half the length of your normal season, each game becomes twice as important. It's that simple. There are no games you can drop. There are no games you can sort of take time off. There are no bye weeks. There are no easy teams now. Every game is a must win. hands down. We don't know what the bowl game situation will look like. It's hard to exactly calibrate what you should be doing, what a good season looks like here. But regardless, there's no opportunity to take your foot off the gas pedal. You have to just go here. You have to stay focused. You have to stay keyed in for 7 weeks, and that's not easy. So I think every game is massively important. But for me, I said this earlier when we didn't know what the schedule even was. We didn't even know if Cal would be playing in the fall. Given the schedule, I think it's still true. The week 2 matchup against Arizona State is Cal's most important game. There are a lot of other big games on the schedule. You have the big game against Stanford. There's a big matchup against Oregon, I think, in week 5. But the ASU game is massive, right? Jaden Daniels is going to be the best quarterback Cal faces all season. He had a pretty good game against him last time. Last season, Arizona State came into Memorial Stadium. Cal was 4-0. They were the number 15 in the country. Chase Garbers got injured. Arizona State got the upset, and Cal got dumped from the rankings. And that was a massive evening. I think it changed the trajectory of Cal's season. They lost 3 after that. They were 4-4, and they definitely picked it up and had a fantastic end to their 2019 campaign. But that Arizona State game was a game changer. It was a season changer. I mean, it shook them up. The Blue and Gold haven't won in Arizona since 2011. They haven't beaten a team from Arizona since 2015. Right? Call it a curse, call it difficult, but Cal struggles against Arizona teams. And in week 2 against Arizona State, they need to shake that. If they want to have the kind of season that people like me and Cam Bynum are calling them to have, this is massively important. I think in a lot of ways, it's the most losable game on the schedule. It'll be on the road. And Arizona State is a program that's really comparable to Cal. They have a young, up-and-coming quarterback, a coach who's making a lot of headlines as of late, and they're a team that's getting ready to challenge in their division and challenge this conference the same way Cal is, and really start to turn things over. And it's a matchup you could see in future years in the conference championship game, and it's one Cal needs to win if it wants to have a good season.
Yeah, I think you're right on par in the case that ASU and Cal are kind of the same team in each division. They're both the up-and-coming programs that are looking to take over the division. And this is, like you said, this is the season to do it. It's 7 games. Anything can happen. So, but I agree that week 2 game, that's a tough 2-game start for Cal, UW and ASU. But for me, it all comes back to Oregon. People are talking about Cal being a potential dark horse for king of the Pac-12 North. Well, to be the king, you got to beat the reigning king, and that's Oregon. It's a week 5 matchup. Both teams are going to be pretty settled into their seasons. I would have liked to play them a bit earlier. New quarterback, new offensive line. There's a chance to feast on that. But people are forgetting that Cal hung with them last season. It was a 17-7 loss in Oregon, a rowdy Autzen Stadium without Chase Garbers. And that was with their full offensive line, with a first-round NFL quarterback, Justin Herbert, and with that stacked secondary. Now you lose all those players. You're playing at home in Memorial Stadium. The Bears, I think could have won that game with Chase Garbers last season. And now coming here, all those players lost. They still have some young talent in that secondary, but it's not going to be the same unit as last season, which only allowed 220 passing yards per game. They're going to be a different-looking team. They'll, I'm sure, have built some chemistry by the time they play Cal. But Cal, I don't think you can really argue. They're the more experienced team this season, which hasn't really been the case in any of Cal's recent matchups with Oregon. Everyone's talking about how the Bears are on the rise. This is the chance to flip that script. If Cal can beat Oregon in week 5, people are going to really have to start looking at Cal as the team to beat in the North. Do I think it's going to happen? There's a lot that can change between now and then, so I don't know if I'll go as far as to say a prediction yet. But my mentality is when you have Chase Garbers, you have a chance, because he was 7-0 last season when he played the whole game. And I think this offense, depending on how things pan out the first 4 weeks of the season, could put up some points against that Oregon defense. And just overall, I think this is the best chance Cal has had to beat Oregon in a long time, and I would not be surprised if it were to happen. But on the flip side of that, both of us are talking about beating some quality teams, but Cal is Cal. They always get upset by some team that they should not lose to. It happens seemingly in every Cal sport. There's always some kind of, whether you call it a fluke or just a horrible game plan or whatever the case may be, there's always a big upset. If there was one this season, who do you think has the best shot of taking down the Bears?
Well, our good friend Josh Yuen used to say that the worst thing a Cal fan can have is hope. And so I apologize from the outside. I've made a lot of bold predictions. Josh, if you're out there, uh, don't want to give anyone the wrong impression here. I said every game on the schedule is important, right? You can't afford to lose any of them, and I still think that's true. The Pac-12 North has no really rollover, easy win, light work teams. There's no easy team on this schedule. Washington State has a new coach. I think a lot of people are underrating them since Mike Leach has left, but Nick Rolovich is also a great head coach, and Washington State has never been a team that has tons of expectations and talent on their shoulders. I think they've always managed to come in and do a lot with what they have, and it wouldn't surprise me if they did the same thing this season. I mean, Cal had a big win against them last year, but it was by no means a cakewalk. I don't expect this year to be a cakewalk either. Same with Oregon State. Jonathan Smith is a great coach, and Oregon State has lost a lot of offensive talent, but they're also they're up and comers. A lot of people forget Oregon State finished second in the Pac-12 North Division last season, and I think it'd be premature to just write them off at the beginning of the year. There are no easy games in this Pac-12 North schedule, and so I think there are a plethora of opportunities for both Oregon State and Washington State, two teams who maybe a lot of folks are discounting, to come in and beat Cal. Oregon State did it last year in Memorial Stadium, and those are two away games. The Bears will have to visit Pullman. The Bears will have to visit Corvallis. But for me, the biggest quote unquote upset is going to come against UW, and I'm not sure you would qualify this as exactly an upset. I think ESPN actually favors the Huskies in this one, but Cal was called to finish above UW in the preseason Pac-12 poll that came out this morning. I think a lot of people would see Cal as having the ability to win this one. They beat UW twice in a row. So it breaks more evenly for me, but I think this is a really important matchup because it's part of Cal's really difficult opening to the season. I talked about that ASU game in week 2 being really important. So is, of course, the season opener on November 7th against UW. These are two really good teams, UW and ASU. And if Cal slips up and can't get some wins, they could play two really good games and still start the season 0-2. So for me, You've beaten UW 2 years in a row. They've been crazy games, to be sure, but you can't come into this thinking, hey, new coach, new quarterback, we're feeling good, because then UW's going to get you, and then you're starting in a hole. So I think it's not exactly an upset, but for me, this UW one is kind of in that vein where it looks like it could be easy for Cal, but it certainly won't be.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily including UW or ASU in the pool of an upset because I think as of now, those lines are just about even, especially this early in the season. Like, we don't really know what any of those teams are going to look like. But like you said, UW is week 1, and Cal was ranked above UW in the preseason poll. So that's definitely a fair game to call a potential upset. But for me, I'm all at the big game. And it's a week 4 Friday night matchup in Berkeley, and I think Cal will definitely end up being favored in this one, which is why I'm calling it a potential upset. But rivalry games can always go either way. It's on home turf, but Stanford is going to be hungry for revenge after losing their first big game in a decade, and they'll come ready to play. So I'm not the most confident in that game, but I mean, we'll see how the season is panning out until then. But moving on to our final topic for the day, we're talking about what the Pac-12 North will look like after week 6. So the 6-game regular season, Jasper mentioned it, the 38 members of the media were polled as to where they think each team is going to finish. There were 35 first-place votes for Oregon, 3 for Cal, and 0 for UW. So that off the bat says that maybe more people are talking about Cal as a potential contender than we think. I mean, one of the Cal beat reporters published his picks, and Cal was number 2. So these might be non-Cal people, and probably are non-Cal people, who think that this team has potential. And I would agree that Cal is probably going to finish second in the Pac-12 North, even though Washington has the easier schedule. UW plays Arizona week 3, and they finish last in the Pac-12 South preseason poll. That's a way easier crossover game than Cal has, but they have a lot of turnover, UW, and I see Cal as a more complete team on both sides. They have more continuity, more experience, and I think more potential. But Cal did get screwed with the crossover games. I mean, we play ASU, whereas Oregon plays UCLA, UW plays Arizona, and Stanford plays Colorado. So the Pac-12 did not give the Bears a break by any means, but I think Cal is at the point in Justin Wilcox's development of this program where they can take on a team like ASU, and we don't necessarily need a cakewalk of a schedule. But I think just as a whole, the Pac-12 made a major mistake here if they want Oregon or USC to make the college football playoff, because I think they should have given them the hardest teams on the other conference besides each other. So something like Oregon versus ASU or Utah, and then USC versus Cal or UW, because what they did right now doesn't really lend itself to either team having that great of a strength of schedule to make the college football playoff. But look, Oregon's still the number team for me, the number 1 team for me. They're losing a bunch of players, but their recruiting has been great this season, plenty of depth. And they still have Seaverell and Crowdeye, who ate the Bears last season. Great receivers, cornerback Mador Lamore, who originally opted out. He was 12 second team All Pac-12 last season. He actually opted back in a couple days ago, around the same time as Bynum. So that would be still a lot of experience on that. And frankly, it's a cakewalk until week 5 and 6. So they're going to have time to build that chemistry and mesh as an offense. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I overall agree with the media giving Cal the edge over UW for number 2. I think that first game of the season, like you said, is going to play out intensely in terms of determining which team is going to win, or which team is going to finish ahead in the Pac-12 North. Because though I'm not predicting or yet, I would give Cal the slight edge in that game, but I think whoever takes that game has a better shot at the Pac-12 North. And UW has 2 of their best defensive players opt out. They still have star slot cornerback Elijah Molden, who will likely guard Nico Remigio in week 1, but they have only 6 defensive starters back, which is about the same as Cal. But for some reason, it still feels almost like a rebuilding year for UW to me, even though it's not really. Like, it seems like they could maybe drop a game to someone like Oregon State or Stanford again. I just don't think anyone else is a threat to Oregon or Cal besides potentially UW if things fall the right way. I think those 3 teams will all have 4 or more wins come week 7, and then the bottom 3 teams will probably be 3-3 or below. Oregon State is on the upswing, but they have a couple key players they need to replace on offense, and the defense is nowhere near any of the top 3 teams in the Pac-12 North. Plus, they have to play Utah, which is probably going to be a lot. Stanford, I said that was a scary game for Cal, but they have been railed with transfers and opt-outs. They lost their 2 best players in Walker Little and shut down corner Paulson Adebo. Those are both huge blows. Colorado should be a winnable crossover game, and Davis Mills is a great quarterback. So they have the potential, but I just don't see them as a threat to finish top 3. And then last but not least, Wazoo. They're in a mini rebuilding year as well. New coach, new quarterback, new offensive system. It's similar to the air raid, but there are a lot of differences. I mean, Max Borghi could be the best running back in the Pac-12, but then you look at the schedule a bit more. Wazoo has to play USC. It's almost a guaranteed loss, and I expect them to finish near the bottom of the conference. So overall, I'm pretty on par with what the media has said. that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Bear Dash. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, or read our columns on Pac-12 or sportspac12.com. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.